labor leadership, the political leadership, they just view them as background noise and don't seek any real leadership from them. And it doesn't help us build the momentum that we need to push back against the far right and rebuild the labor.
Chris Townsend is a former political director with UE. He's former organizing director for the Amalgamated Transit Union. He has been in the labor movement for a very long time. He has done so much for so many working people. I mean, really, anytime somebody needs him or asks for help, he's there to provide support, and we really appreciate him for the support that he's given us here on the Valley Labor Report and for the support that he gives working people across the country. Chris Townsend, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you reached out to us about, this UAW, Biden, Trump kind of stuff. And we talked about it a little bit earlier and just, we didn't go into a whole lot of analysis. We really just talked about like what it was, like just what happened, because I knew that we were going to be talking about some of the analysis with you. And so how are you seeing this moment as, really for the first time in American history, you've got the presumptive nominees from both political parties like groveling for an endorsement from a union. I mean, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment in time, and I think that folks like us, liberals, leftists, trade unionists, we don't have any problem at all whatsoever in sort of instantly debunking the motivations of a figure like Trump. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's almost laughable. But the Joe Biden self-appointed, self-gifted title of the most pro-union president in U.S. history is truly preposterous and phenomenal. And it's not helpful right. At all, because it's created an echo of the sycophants and unconditional supporters of him, folks who make money off of him, frankly, and folks who are politically tied to him and get a personal benefit from that. And then it's very confusing to the rank and file. And I think any of us who have followed this, we know that Joe Biden had a long career in the Senate. He was not pro-union. He of course, was not overtly anti-union. We rarely had to battle him on something, but his support was generally lacking on anything that the labor movement needed him to move in his time in the Senate. And now that he was vice president and now president, we should recognize some of the things that he's done, and we should not demonize him or in any way try to water down what he has done. But to make the claim that somehow this has graduated him to the most pro-union president in history is absurd. It exceeds the boundaries of the imagination on any sober day. And it's confusing because, we certainly need to mobilize the membership and confront the right danger, Trump primary among it. But we don't need to essentially blow a lot of smoke around the members and confuse them. And I think the best evidence of this is not Chris Townsend's opinion, but the Huffington Post sent a reporter up to Michigan because there was this oddity that you were referring to, Jacob. We had the former president and the current president chasing workers around Michigan because it's a battleground state. If we weren't having an election, neither one of them would have went anywhere near that state. But in the Huffington Post article, it was about 2 days ago, there was extensive interviews with working people on both sides of the political equation. And neither candidate, either Biden or Trump, got any great credit from working people from this. It was something that I would have expected to see, but I guess I had to see it. I mean, it was just really, it proved that there was just a deep-seated cynicism of working people on both sides of this aisle. And then, of course, a large group of people that don't identify with either of these political parties. And I think that whatever the goal was of either campaign, it was confused, garbled, not helpful. And instead, what we need, maybe I'll end with this. I'll say, this sitting president needs to actually do something to assist these workers. And flying out there to walk the picket line for 6.5 minutes this is not helpful. Opens him up to criticism, and people, we need something more meaningful. So there are many, many things that he could do as United States president, which him and his inner circle are averse to even discussing.
Right. Yeah, and I absolutely would not. I would not contest the fact that there are more meaningful things that he could do. But I do wonder if you don't think that it's at least they're meaningful in the sense that it is. I would interpret this as kind of a message to the companies that, like, look, you're not going to be getting any help from the federal government on this kind of thing. It's not necessarily saying that we're going to put our thumb on the scales in this, but what do you think about that insofar as being a message to the companies that, look, you're on your own here, and as opposed to previous presidents who have, sent in federal troops to break up strikes, right?
I don't think any of the big three management gave a damn about either candidate visiting. They know that Joe Biden has borrowed billions of dollars. Let's get this on the record too. He's got the power to borrow. He's borrowed. He's distributed billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to the auto companies. These three corporations and unorganized companies, Tesla and others, have benefited massively from Biden's largesse. And there's no fear whatsoever that this is suddenly going to be tapered down or stopped or anything. I mean, there's no discussion of that, no announcement that was one of the ways he was contemplating influencing these companies. There's no full court press of any of the regulatory agencies or anything. There's no rallying of other people in his party. There was no waiting group of congressional members. Where were the two senators from Michigan? So all of this is happening literally only for the camera eye, with the hope that somehow voters would respond to him. None of this was intended for the auto companies, and I think it just adds to the cynicism about what was this. And it's and again, go back in the just recent few years. What could President Biden do, or any other president do as a sitting president, to assist workers in battle? Walking the picket line is something. We ought to not dismiss that. The auto workers were very welcoming of him, and that means something, yes. But go back to the launch of the Amazon union thing. There was never any statements made, either in Staten Island or in Bessemer, Alabama, by the White House, actually saying very clearly, you should vote for the union and participate. This was what Franklin Roosevelt told workers. His classic, famous, probably now forgotten statement: if I was a worker, the first thing I would do is join a union. And we never got anything like that. We got platitudes and small little references to those two gigantic elections that we had, one successful, one unsuccessful. Roll fast forward to Starbucks. There's never been a press release from the White House that says that the workers in Starbucks should join the union. It's sort of like, well, we'll work with the NLRB and we support you and all this. There's never been an actual affirmative act. And I will submit that what is happening in a corporation like Starbucks, like Amazon, like any large corporation today, there's a criminal conspiracy to smash the union, spy on workers, harass them, and terminate them. Premeditated. This is what's known as a conspiracy. It is a criminal act that they're doing. The president has the right to investigate this and apply some law enforcement, not just weak NLRB regulatory machinery, but use criminal prosecution against these corporations. No mention of this, nothing. So it ends up being, maybe the next one I'll mention is the railroad strike. Joe Biden cynically, unbelievably broke the railroad strike. We still have the basic issues that were leading to that strike unaddressed. Low wages, dangerous working conditions, and no days off, or too few days off. And he busted that strike. And that is something with 4 monopoly railroads, which is what all we have now, because of governmental, hands-off type things, allow these corporations to become bigger and bigger. And we now have a situation where that was broken. People quickly forgot about it, didn't want to talk about it. We had the interesting situation with the Biden administration during the UPS strike, where Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, told him very loudly and publicly, I don't want your help. I don't need your help. Don't come out here. Well, if that isn't a repudiation by itself of these claims of being so pro-union, I don't know what is. But this was not some personality conflict. He didn't want these people coming out there, the president or any of his entourage, confusing the matter or doing what they're prone to do in all these cases is not take sides. They want to play mediator. So when in the auto talks prior to the strike, Biden made the whopper offer of sending Gene Sperling and Julie Sue, of which any normal person would have said, who are they? One is a has-been, one is somebody who's a nice person, but she's not very well known. Neither one have ever negotiated labor contracts or been involved in strike struggle or anything like that. Well, Shawn Fain, president of UAW, had good sense to say, no thanks, I don't need you to send these folks out here. Because what he was well aware of is that they would have come out there and tried to mediate. They weren't being sent to advocate. They weren't being sent to take a side, to look into this. Anyway, so to me, Jacob, this is until we have a president that actually takes sides, and in this case, the righteous side of the workforce, after everything that has been done to working people in this country, this is going to be a disingenuous expedition at best.
Yes, and I do want to mention that, you said that in your email to me that we do Biden a favor actually by confronting him, and this is a point that I was making on.
Yes.
I was a guest on Left Reckoning last week. I don't know if you I don't know if you've heard of them, but they've got a YouTube program, and I enjoy listening to them. And what I was mentioning is that, look, if the UAW is ultimately at some point going to endorse Joe Biden, maybe they will, maybe they won't, I don't know. But if they do, it seems like it would be more valuable if it comes after a prolonged, trying to get Biden to do more stuff. That way it seems more real. You get a whole news cycle out of one union's endorsement. It gets closer to the election, so people actually hear about it and care about it and remember it, right? And this would not have happened. This trip to Michigan, basically trying to earn an endorsement. Donald Trump trying to, groveling for an endorsement. It would not have happened if the UAW had endorsed.
No, absolutely.
Biden already.
Look, the optics of this particular Biden visit were so garbled, so bungled. I think everyone may know that the president's visit to Michigan came several days after Trump's announcement that he was going to go.
Right.
And then also in the wake of the fact that the United Auto Workers said, we're going to continue to consider this, and we're not going to endorse you yet, because folks may remember the AFL-CIO as the labor body of at least half of our labor movement in the United States. They had made it starkly, in my estimation, ill-conceived, almost dangerous early endorsement, unconditional endorsement as well. No conditions were placed on that, and the UAW dissented from that. So, to me, I couldn't be more proud of the UAW leadership and the Teamster leadership to say, wait a minute here, we're not just going to hand out our endorsement and hang our union button on you without a significant discussion, significant affirmative, provable, tangible acts on behalf of our members and broader working class. And I think this moment just it reveals how remote the White House is from the reality of the workplace and the reality of the trade union movement today. And I want to say it won't be popular, but I've never been one to seek popularity. The trade union leadership in the United States that has fomented this situation, the ones who stand up, the presidents of the various unions and the AFL-CIO, when they get up, and many of them are, repeating this claim that Joe Biden is the most pro-union president. Well, these folks ought to have their heads examined, really, and the members of these unions ought to look at this and say, this is the caliber of leadership that you have. I mean, these are preposterous statements for them to repeat. And it's also, I think I had mentioned to you in our conversation that all of these union leaders poll their own memberships. And whatever you say about polling, it is fairly scientific. It's a science in motion, but you dare not ignore it. Over and over and over again when they poll their own membership. Large proportions, 30, 40% of their membership comes up as supporting Trump. And then the question becomes, what are these unions doing? What is the Labor Federation doing to educate the membership about how dangerous that is, how self-defeating that is, and whatnot? But of course, the problem is almost nothing is done to educate them. And then, of course, if all you're going to do is run around and yell slogans that this particular president deserves your support because he's the most pro-union president, when there's no basis for that claim, I think we find ourselves where we are today. And in that article I had mentioned in HuffPo, large numbers of people just view the labor leadership, the political leadership, all that. They just view them as discredited background noise going on and don't seek any real leadership from them. And it doesn't help them. It doesn't help us build the momentum that we need to push back against the far right and rebuild the labor movement.
Right. Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
And, I find it particularly objectionable, like the language that we use in our endorsements. You mentioned as political director of the UE that you would recommend people vote for Democrats. Typically, obviously there are exceptions, but you would recommend that people vote for Democrats, but purely as like a defensive maneuver, not because this Democrat that you're saying that you should probably vote for is, the greatest thing since sliced bread. And you mentioned that it's a disservice to the membership. And I really, really agree with that, because it seems like we can encourage our membership and turn out our membership to vote for this candidate who's typically a Democrat, who's going to be better for us or less bad for us, without, all of the fluff, right? Our members are adults. Our members are union members. Our members are our brothers and sisters. And it really just seems like it would be so much more respectful to when we do our endorsements, unless it's like a really remarkable kind of candidate, like a Bernie Sanders. Like a Bernie Sanders is somebody who would be worthy of a lot of these types of ringing endorsements. But virtually no other politician in the country is. We can say you should vote for this person, but it really baffles the mind that people feel the need to just go over the top with it.
I was the political director for UE, United Electrical Workers, for 21 years. I spoke to a lot of members and worked a lot of political campaigns, federal, state, and local. And my message was consistent. And it was not my message, it was the union's message. It was a democratically arrived at message, which was to say, vote like a worker, vote defensively, don't do crazy things, don't believe these folks based on promises and platitudes. Look at the record and then realize that our voting strategy is to buy time, that we're going to elect a lesser evil because we're only allowed to have two parties at the national level. I think anyone that wants to promote that fairy tale that somehow you're allowed to have third parties, well, not unless they're from the billionaire class, because that's part of the problem, the expense alone of fielding a candidate. But I used to give that talk, and I would say the question is pushing back against anti-labor retrograde elements, which in recent times have been concentrated in the Republican Party. Push back, it means that you frequently have to elect sometimes unfit, uninspiring, sometimes better than an average Democrat. but all it does is buy us time. We are hurtling towards various multi-layered calamities in this country. We have a climate calamity that now this summer we saw. We have falling living standards of workers. Well, let's get this on the record. They're not falling. It's not an act of gravity. They're being driven down by uncontrolled corporate dictatorship. We have a federal regulatory and that whole regimen is non-functional. Congress is even today non-functional. And we have the rise of a violent, armed, fascist network that remains largely unaddressed and has mass support and has the expression at the highest levels in our Congress. So I look at this and I think, wow, we're buying time. But the missing link here is, what is the leadership of this labor movement doing to push back on that? I mean, we may be, I hate to say this, it may come as a shock to some, but at the rate we're going, if these particular Republican elements regain power, we may be within a few months or years of the banning of the trade union movement. We've seen that in country after country. They come after us for good reason, because they know that we are that force that promotes the class solidarity and pushes back against the employers. That would have been a hyperbolic statement just a few years ago. It's not anymore. So I just challenge the labor leadership to say, what is it we're doing to mobilize the membership, teach and lead the membership, to push back against these retrograde forces, not just running around telling people to vote for any Democrat, as if that by its singular act is going to fix the problem or save us from that far worse fate that does await us.
Right. You alluded to it, and since you did, I want to ask you to expand on it, if you would. You mentioned kind of a delusion about a third party, winning the presidency. And I find the, third party advocates, like I don't have an issue with third parties. I think they're fine. And particularly at a local level, if you can do it, then, more power to you. Bernie Sanders did it. And, he became, a very influential kind of person. So, but I think delusional is the right word when you're talking about the presidency, and the people that are so kind of hung up on that, they conceive of themselves as moving beyond electoral politics to some kind of better and brighter future by advocating that people vote for a third party. But it's just a substitution. Instead of telling people to vote for the red team and all of your troubles will be over, or vote for the blue team and all of your troubles will be over. No, you don't need that. If you vote for the green team, right, everything's going to be fine. And it kind of blows my mind that people can kind of put that at the center of their politics and then act like they're beyond the kind of Democratic and Republican partisans.
Yeah, I mean, in my 45 years of paying attention to things in this country, it's a generalization that would hold water. That in my experience, my view, looking back, that if a third party arises and remains insignificant, it's tolerated. It may be harassed politically, or its ballot status may be questioned, and its fundraising might be undermined. But it'll be tolerated because it presents no danger. But if we find a movement that begins to actually look like something may materialize out of that in a permanent way, well, both parties have proven over the decades to gang up to prevent this. This, in some ways, is their worst nightmare. And I've always said in the last 20, 30 years that the dilemma we face with the current setup of Democrats and Republicans is that as the Republicans increasingly lurch to the far right, and the extreme right, and beyond that into out-and-out fascism, all the Democratic Party has to do to remain a viable second party is to be 1 degree to the left of that.
Right.
And then when you vote, given that that's the only choice that you're presented with, what choice do you have? And of course, there are choices. One of the big choices is people sit it out. People say the hell with it. People don't engage. They say, well, what difference does it make? Well, it does make some difference. But I think when you are one of those voices in the Democratic Party that continually exaggerates and makes claims, preposterous claims of how much better they are and all that. It's not bought by the vast majority of people. And I guess it comes back to what I said to I don't know how many countless UE members. I said, we're not endorsing the Democrat in most cases. We're not hanging the union button on them, sacrificing our own credibility as leaders in our union. We're saying to people, you have a practical choice. It's the only one you're allowed to have in this corrupt situation. So don't do something crazy. Don't make your problem worse. Don't add to your burden. Support this person as a means to buy time. And then the question becomes, what are you doing with that time that you bought? And I would submit that my critique of the bulk of the trade unions are they participate in buying that time, and then they don't do anything with that time. And it's the trade union movement, even in my lifetime, used to expend some time and energy teaching and leading members about the facts of life and our political. It's virtually gone. Go to a website and read a 2-paragraph piece. In some ways, the publicity and the education of the trade union movement has been handed over to the Democratic Party for them to write it. And this is an exceedingly dangerous situation on several levels, not just this.
Yep. Chris Townsend, I appreciate your commentary. Always welcome. Before we let you go, are you able and willing to talk about where you're at right now?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm coming to you live and unrehearsed from Rochester, New York, where I'm one of the folks who helped to start, and I helped lead what we call the Inside Organizing School. This is a union organizing school dedicated strictly to initiating campaigns of organization, initiating campaigns in multiple sectors. And we've been in existence since 2017. And we played a key role in the launching of the Starbucks movement, many other successful campaigns as well. So it's a very bare bones, let's get busy. Let's not fool around and shine that diamond any longer. Let's get into the workplaces and let's organize. So it's always very inspiring. We're currently supported by the Workers United Joint Board here. This was the home base of the Starbucks movement. And we have held them in Washington, D.C. We've done them on Zooms. We're planning now to move them around the country. I hope we can come south, probably in the winter, to do this, to help inspire this young generation of workers that want to get into motion and want to do it. It's real, it's tangible. And a lot of what we do is to stimulate the unions to do more than what they are, because anyone who follows trade union organizing in the United States knows that the numbers are still bad. The numbers are still diminishing. The labor movement is not growing. And what we've seen in places where, energetic activism can be launched, success can be had. And we act as a little bit of a push on some of these trade unions to do it. And maybe the final thing I'll say is that we all knew that during the pandemic, union organizing, like so many things, was kind of derailed, stalled, or whatnot. But the facts will reveal that today, as the pandemic has abated, we're still not even back to the trade union commitment that it had prior to that. So it was understandable, perhaps, under some of those circumstances. But why haven't we come back? Why aren't we making up for the time? Where are the organizers? Where are the campaigns? Where is the AFL-CIO? It announced an organizing initiative 18 months ago, and I still have no evidence of it. So in any case, we do what we can do as one small school. I wrote an article, if anyone's curious about it, I wrote an article for Labor Notes, if they can remember, Labor Notes, if you're familiar with it, Chris Townsend. If you Google up an article that I wrote about salting, this is one of the tactics of, speeding up new organizing. If you Google up the article that they did back in May, it has my email. So anyone interested in our school, just Google up Chris Townsend salting Labor Notes, and the article will come up, and my email is there for anybody that would be curious. We don't have a website, although we had one and we lost the login information during the pandemic. I mean, it's because we don't put a big premium on a bureaucracy here. We put a premium on doing the organizing. So anyway, thanks for asking. It's a wonderful project that we have going here.
Yep, absolutely. Chris, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you and good luck.
Yep, appreciate it.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.